Good afternoon, and thank you all for your patience. We're a minute or two late getting started here, but I want to welcome you to the first Women in Business panel. I'm really excited this afternoon to have a chance to talk about women, where we are with our careers, where we are with our family, how we think about the impact of COVID, how we think about the spotlight on racial injustice and the actions that we can take. How we think about furlough and new jobs. So we've got so much to talk about, and I've got an incredible panel of women that are on here with us today. I want to just take a minute and acknowledge that this is our first in a series of roundtables that we'll be doing at Verizon. And as we've battled through COVID, we've taken a very strong position that says we can have a louder voice on behalf of women and on behalf of small businesses, on behalf of customers and society. And so this is really just to have a conversation to hopefully learn from one another, share with one another, and really keep the conversation going. Because I think if there's one thing we would all acknowledge is that we're in uncharted waters right now. And, we rolled into the first part of the year with COVID. We then saw the tragic death of George Floyd on May 25th, a day that we'll never forget. And we think about how do we take that moment and really create a movement. I happen to be in New Jersey working without power because of the storm that came through here. And so it just feels like a year that we will all remember. And yet it's a year that I think we will come out of stronger. We'll know more about how we work together. I have a hope that we will be a kinder, gentler organization and society as we think about what we can learn from one another. So before I get started, let me just take a minute and acknowledge and thank CircleAround as we think about the role of Girl Scouts, and they've played on everyone's lives. Girl Scout is a new opportunity. You raised your hands. Thank you, ladies, if you participated. I buy the cookies every year. It's part of what we do. And then the National Association of Women Business Owners, the ability to really come together with other groups, I think, is so important. I'm going to take a quick second just to introduce our panelists. The first one I'll introduce Shelley Zalis, who I've known for quite some time. You know her from the Girls Lounge. She says something that I oftentimes think about, that is, we are stronger together when we bring all of our efforts together. So Shelley Zalis, who is joining us, Rachel Montañez, Kelly Schweitzer, Alex Wallace from our own Verizon Media. So Alex, thank you for joining. And Jenny Alonzo. So thank you, ladies, for being here. I went quickly because I'm going to ask each of them to do their own introduction because I think we get a little personal flavor of who they are when we hear from them directly. And so, Jenny, let's start with you. Glad to see you on video now. I know we had a little bit of a technical problem getting in. Glad to see you. Thank you for joining. Tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you, Tami. Hello, everybody. Nice to see everyone here. Tami, you have no idea of the technical problems I've been having since last night. So I'm just happy to really be here. My background, media executive, I started as an intern at WNBC in New York. From there, stayed at the network for about 5 years. Before that, actually, I did a little stint at an advertising agency. So I got to work on products like IBM and the Wall Street Journal. And so that was kind of tiny. But I got pulled out of broadcast and into the cable industry when really there were only a handful of cable networks out there. And specifically, I was recruited to help launch Lifetime Television for Women. And so that was my, I ran back home and I was like, oh my goodness, I guess I better get cable now, right? That kind of thing. Since then, I was at Lifetime for quite a few years, launched Lifetime Movie Network, fantastic team. Actually, an amazing experience as far as the professional experience, right? And then I went into more of the independent route, started working on startups, encountered some interesting situations as a woman, I have to admit, in that space. And since then, I've been just working on projects that I love, partnering with creative people and working on movies, and right now dabbing into the world of video games, which, by the way, is the wild, wild west in the content space. That's about it. I've been with the Girl Scouts board for 11 years. I'm about to hop off. I was not a Girl Scout. When I was recruited, I turned it down a couple of times because I said, I don't know anything about the movement. And so they came back and said, look, we need people who haven't been. and you're Latina, and, why? I said, because my parents don't trust, their kids going off to camp with people they don't know. That's why. And so, because to me, that was all what Girl Scouts was camping, and that was it. I didn't even know about the cookies, right? So, fast forward, spending the years that I have, I actually feel cheated as a female leader that I was not a Girl Scout. I think if I had been a Girl Scout, I would have had, I would have probably done a few things differently in my career. And I'm kind of upset that my girls were not exposed to it either.
You know what's great about your experiences? It makes you passionate about something you missed out on, something you can really lean into. I appreciate your background. Really impressive. Thank you for joining our conversation today, Jenny. I appreciate it. Rachel, I'm going to move to you.
Sure. My name is Rachel Montañez, and I am a career coach focused on helping individuals make career changes. And I do that in a holistic way. Specifically, people come to me when they're burnt out and when they're stressed and when they're bored. So I'm really a big believer in creating the life that you want to live, and everybody's version of success is different. So we work through a lot of the inner work, really focusing on mindset to then affect change so it comes from the inside. Kind of growing up, I had an interest in journalism and law, which I know they're completely different. But I've always kind of been a creative ideas person. But I knew that I didn't want to write full time, and I have a passion, a deep, deep love for the career coaching world. So I got into the media industry because I wanted to continue, writing. So now I use my voice and my platform to talk about burnout and all the stories that I hear as a career coach.
Wow. I thought maybe you got into media because you knew there were a lot of people that had burnout in media. So it's good to know that there was a passion that drove you there. I just think so important. So thank you for sharing. Callie, I'm going to move to you. Fascinating world of LinkedIn.
Yes. Hey, everyone. I'm Callie Schweitzer. I am the senior news editor overseeing the editorial coverage of the marketing industry on LinkedIn's team of global journalists. My background is a news junkie and media nerd. I have had an obsession with understanding how people get news and information and how they share news and information for as long as I can remember. I studied journalism in college and ultimately would end up working at places like Talking Points Memo, Vox Media, Time Inc., and Thrive Global, Ariana Huffington's wellness company. Most recently, I founded and launched my own consulting business, and here I am today working at a technology platform.
That's terrific, and you're quite young, so you've given us a long history. I'm like, that's impressive. So thank you so much for sharing. Alex.
Hi, I am, first of all, I'm just impressed looking at this whole panel, so it's great to be here. I run media and content for Verizon Media, as Tami said. And I had a pretty straightforward path, although it had 75 stops along the way, in that I knew pretty early on what I wanted to do because I, like Callie, was a news junkie and media nerd. And 4 weeks after I graduated from college, I walked into CBS News and took an unpaid internship and waitressed every night. And I was kind of fired from a number of restaurants, so it was there were lots of ways to pay the bills as I worked for free for CBS, but I stayed there for 17 years. I then went to NBC for 10 years, and then I decided I was done with broadcast, only wanted to do digital, and came to Verizon. So I, most of the time, get to do exactly what I love and have since I was little.
I won't say it's only most of the time. We have a pretty good time at Verizon. So Alex, so glad you're part of our organization. Shelley.
Yeah, so excited to be here and see some of my girlfriends new and the ones that I've known forever. So thank you, Tami, for including me. I've had a zigzag career, definitely not textbook-like. I kind of make things up as I go along, and that becomes what I be. And so I am the pioneer of online research. So for anyone who's taken one of those horrible surveys on the internet, sorry, not sorry, I am the mother of that invention. I was also the only female CEO top 25 my entire career. I did inherit the title Chief Troublemaker. I am known to break the rules that make no sense and write the new ones get rid of the junk in the trunk and put the ones in that will truly help all of us thrive in the workplace today. I sold my company a few years ago and realized that it was time to create a community of women supporting other women, making the invisible visible, and all of us owning our strengths that historically we have hidden, but realizing that our differences are our greatest strengths. So as Tami said, by accident, we went from a moment to a movement. We created something called the Girls Lounge to take on the Boys Club, opposite of boy-girl club lounge. If there's a boys club, why not have a girls lounge? We've connected over 50,000 women in the workplace globally. We've evolved them now to equality lounges where we do pop-ups all over the world, bringing conscious leadership together to rewrite the rules that were written, of course, over 100 years ago by men for men, where now we can write the rules that will make the best sense for us to all bring our best selves, our whole selves to the table. And our company is called the Female Quotient. We're all about advancing women across race, age, intersectionality, LGBT ability, and advancing equality. And most importantly, activating solutions for change, creating measurement for accountability, and closing the gaps. Parity policy pipeline, sooner than 257 years and sooner than 99.5 years before we see C-suite leadership, quality in the C-suite.
Yeah, it's so amazing when you put some of those numbers out there and say, how do we close that gap? And you realize how long it's intended to be. Shelley, one of the things I love about your story, because one of the common factors we all have here today is either media or tech as background. And I recall you starting Girls Lounge and really getting the idea for this when you went to CES. Maybe just share that story, because it's a pretty cute story of like feeling pretty lonely.
Yeah, I knew in market research, put me in any room, I will know a lot of people. I've been in research for over 30, really long time. But in technology, I really didn't know anyone, and I wanted to migrate research since I built a technology-enabled research business. And so I wanted to go to CES, heard there was 150,000 people, less than 3% were women, and it was really intimidating. I didn't want to go by myself, and I didn't have the Girl Scouts, even though I was a Girl Scout, and that's a whole other story when you talk about camping trips. And my mother sent me on the camping trip with white jeans. You could, and with a safety pin to hold the zipper. So you can imagine in an emergency what happens. That's another story. And so I didn't want to go by myself to CES. And so what do you do when you're nervous? You invite your girlfriends. So I invited 4 girlfriends, said, walk the floor with me. And by the way, if you know other women that want to go, invite them. 24 hours later, 50 women showed up. We walked the floor. 2 remarkable things happened in that moment. 1, every single guy's head turned. Like, where the heck did all you women come from? And that's when I coined the phrase, a woman alone is power, collectively we have impact. The second moment was I was surrounded by women just like me. We all had the same challenges, work-life balance, perfection, imposter syndrome, blah, blah, blah. The next thing you knew, the next day we were 100, 350 women, and we took over the penthouse, and more business was done in this period of time, more learning and sharing the good, bad, and the ugly. And that was the moment. And it was interesting because when we created the Girls Lounge, a lot of women said, but we're not girls, we're women. And I said, have you ever heard of a man object to being called a boy in the boys club? I said, girlfriends, girls, and a women's lounge, boring, ladies' lounge, bathroom, Girls Lounge. And so that's how the Girls Lounge was born.
I love it. Shelley, thank you for sharing that story. And speaking of obstacles, one of the things that's amazed me in my career is it's taken us a while to get to a point where we're willing to openly talk about those obstacles and reach to our right and reach to our left and say, I need some help. And right now, I think we're facing some really unique obstacles as we think about COVID and the impact to families. And I think women are facing a bigger impact and a bigger disadvantage, quite frankly, than men, because we play a unique role in our families. We tend to be the one that kids go to cook the meals and to now be the educators, to be the teachers at home. Alex, I'm going to ask you to maybe just take the lead in starting this conversation, because I do want it to be a conversation of what are we seeing, what are we hearing, and what do we do about it as we now face a new school year. In the South, many of the schools have started to go back and trying to figure out, is it part-time? Do you go one day, not? Do you do everything from home? And, the point your kid comes and asks for help with advanced algebra, you're like, whoa, that was a few years ago. So Alex, what are you seeing in terms of kind of women's role in COVID, and how do you have a career and have a family?
So it's really interesting. I actually thought that my husband took 8 years off of his career to raise our kids. And so I always thought I had kind of figured it out, was that I had a high-powered career and he had stepped back a little. But it's interesting. He went back to work. He runs a very small school. He's an educator. I've realized in COVID that I still run the family. I'm the family strategist. I kind of run what is going on in our family. So while he may actually cook, which he does, I am still always, what is going on with their education? My son has not gotten a haircut in 5 months. That's today. That's this evening project. So really making sure that everything is happening as it should be, and the amount of variables. And I would just say in my own life, the variable of education is massive. Both my kids are in high school. Literally every week it's changing. Are they going back to school in person? Are they going online? What should you do? Their summer jobs got canceled. And I just wanted to say, I looked at a chart yesterday. We do kind of productivity charts, and I looked at a chart, and there were 3 names on the kind of lower left quadrant, and I realized they were all working mothers. And I do think there is something about COVID that has put more pressure back on women, because I'm the kind of woman who I always said, nope, I've got a completely equal marriage. I've got complete division of labor in my life. And I know in my family, I am definitely bearing more of the burden of COVID. So I don't know the answer, Tami, but I think it's something we need to fix, because I would just say I really worry this is going to go on, through 2020 at least, and I don't want women to lose a year. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah. Rachel, Alex, thank you for that, because I think you set that up so well, is as much as you maybe thought you had it all figured out, COVID has changed that for all of us as we think about it, kind of a new hand and figuring out how we deal with that. Rachel, you talked about kind of the stress and pressure and anxiety of life. Now you see that with COVID. What are you seeing? Any thoughts, ideas as a coach, as a counselor that you would give us as we think about that challenge for women? Because ultimately, I'm hopeful that when we come through COVID, we will have proven that we can have more work-life flexibility and not always have to be in the office, not always have to be on the road to be effective. So I'm hopeful. But how do we think about, and what are some of the tips or tricks you might have in terms of remedying that anxiety and that stress and that fatigue that people might feel?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and it's so important for us to take the time to think about it. I think one of the things is being graceful, giving yourself grace, extending grace, and being kind to yourself. I mean, the beautiful thing about COVID, and it's kind of funny saying beautiful attached to something like COVID, but it gives us a collective experience. We're all in this together. So any feelings that you are feeling, someone else is probably feeling them too. So I think that's probably the first step. And secondly, thinking about the things that you can control, and when it's something that you can't control, owning that and saying, okay, I don't know when school is going to start. I don't know how I'm going to pull this together, but it's okay. I've put it out there. Recognize that there are elements of it that I can't control. And then I think, kind of like we're doing today, tapping into other people, asking for help, asking for resources, using the resources that are available, and really embracing them as well. So I think those 3 things, but it's so important to actually be intentional and to take the time and to reflect on how you're feeling.
I feel better just listening to the calm of your voice. It's very smooth. It's very calming. It's a reminder to give ourselves some grace. I think we tend to have very high standards for ourselves. And as the CEO of our homes, Alex, you said it well, how do you squeeze that in and do all the things that you aspire to do in life and give yourself a little grace? Give yourself permission to ask for help. I just think so important. And I think those are good reminders for us, Rachel, as we think about how can we show up under uncertain times and yet be intentional and purposeful about that. I think so well stated. Any other thoughts from Shelley, Kelly, Jenny on this topic of women and the impact of COVID, things we should think about or tips you've heard to share?
I would just like to add, speaking to what Alex and Rachel mentioned, when I started my career, the whole buzzwords about work-life balance started, right? And, I have to tell you, I said this either was created by a masochist, sadist, or a man, because as a working woman, there was no such thing as work-life balance. And so I used to tell my staff, who were all young women, I'm like, get out of here. You got to find a husband or a partner or something, and they would laugh at me. They're like, what about you? I said, I've got to figure it out, because I had support around me, right? I had my mom near me. I had my husband like yours, Alex, who, jumped off of the career track and was, being a lot more flexible at home. But nonetheless, everything, landed on Jenny, right? So I think we need to, like you said, walk away from that work-life balance, because really what I tell people is, just if your work, life is doing okay, right? And your personal life is not, just pray that they're both not coming at you at the same time, right? And it's going to continue to be a yin yang. And that's how you manage it. That's the balance. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be, it's not going to be the picture perfect stuff you see on TV or in films. It just isn't. And accept that. So I love what Rachel said about, the grace, giving each other grace is really important.
Yeah,
I go ahead, Callie, please.
It's especially important because women know that we have a louder inner voice than men do, that inner critic that tells us, that judges us all day, no matter what it is that we're doing, the smallest thing or the largest thing. To Jenny's point, it's a seesaw, that idea of sometimes your personal life will take more, sometimes your professional life will take more. The integration of the two is so key. And at a moment like this, it's so critical. And I hope that this as a moment is a point of inflection for corporate America to say, flexibility is a must. Flexibility is a must, period, end of story. People must be able to work where they want and when they want. Because if offices can't be more flexible, I think we will continue to have this gap.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to jump in. Go ahead.
Go.
Just to add, what I've learned recently is both men and women have those voices in their head. Men just ignore them, and women, the voices get louder and louder. So we just have to shut those voices up. And, when we talk about work-life balance, as Jenny said, there is no such thing as balance. Life is not that easy. It's not 50-50. It's kind of messy. But in COVID, it's where we are seeing there is no separation between work and life. We have one life with 5 dimensions. Work, our family, our community, our friends, and the one that Rachel talked about. We forget about ourselves in that equation. And when you look at the lexicon, leadership is still predominantly men, caregiving is still predominantly women. This is a great moment. If we want equality in the workplace, we need to start creating equality at home and practicing that, where the family shares responsibility, because it is disproportionately falling on primary caregivers right now that are working, if it's working moms that not only have to take care of their family, but also add education into the mix. It is overwhelming and very hard to deal with it. So flexibility, fluidity, life stage accommodation, and time blocking is very essential in this moment.
Yeah, I think that act of time blocking and being intentional about where you spend your time, asking for permission, face it, we like control. And so part of this is we don't want to give up those responsibilities to someone else. We're afraid to reach out and ask. And Shelley and Callie, as you talk about that inner voice, I did a women's panel probably a year ago, and Jerry Elliott from Cisco was on, and she's an amazing executive. She runs sales and marketing. And she said something that I'll never forget. Alex, I think you were there because I'm seeing your reaction. She said, at one point in my life, I finally decided I needed to fire that itty-bitty shitty committee that lives inside my head and tells me I'm not good enough. And I try to remember that, like, fire that itty-bitty committee, because we all have it. And reminding ourselves it's okay to do that, to allow ourselves a little bit of grace. And Rachel, one of the things I'm working on, and I don't have it mastered, but when you say the word grace, I think of it as also trying to give others a little bit of grace. because I find myself being more judgmental right now. Like, come on, get with it, as opposed to being able to give myself grace and to allow others a little bit of grace. Shelley, I want to come to you. You've recently onboarded into a new job. And doing that in a COVID environment, doing that in any environment is a challenge, but doing that in a COVID environment, what's that been like? What have you learned? How has that challenged you? And what would you share for all of us as people are thinking about what is the career move in a COVID environment?
Yeah. So LinkedIn has been an amazing and supportive employer in that onboarding experience, which they have recognized is so strange. One of the most important things was being paired with a buddy at the very beginning. And so I would say that if you're somebody who maybe you've worked at a company for years and you just are interested in meeting new people or connecting with different people in the organization, find a buddy or ask someone who would be a good buddy for me here. And again, it's a different circumstance, but having that person who you can go to is so key. I've also found that instant message, Slack, email, everything can feel so quick and so transactional. So reaching out to people to connect socially for just a virtual coffee, a hang essentially, has been so critical. Getting to know them, getting to know more about their families, about where they're currently living, about their lifestyles. That's been absolutely critical. And to echo Rachel's point, the grace thing is so huge. Recognize that you won't be able to learn things as quickly as you would sitting next to someone saying, can you actually just show me how to do that thing? Or can you remind me, what's that thing again? And that has been something that's been absolutely huge as well, is just talking to myself about that need to quiet the inner voice that says, shouldn't you be learning this faster?
Yeah, I think that onboarding with a buddy is a good reminder. It also takes me to a conversation we oftentimes have about mentors and sponsors. And how do you think about the role that you've either had people play in your life as a mentor or sponsor, or what you might be doing today for others? Alex, I'm going to come to you and start us in that dialogue and conversation.
Two things. I'm actually I've done a lot of both over my career, mentoring and sponsoring. I think sponsorship is really important. I think being in the room and fighting for someone. You know, the first time I got into a hiring room, there was a lot of, Bob, well, let's promote Bob. Betsy's not ready. And I was like, what do you mean not ready? I started listening, like a lot of times women are not ready. And actually, I think it comes to a lot of what we're seeing in some of the inequity we're seeing around racial, not enough racial equality in the C-suite and throughout all of our companies, is thinking about who's in the room making the decisions about who gets promoted. And so I think sponsorship is really important, because not ready, by the way, Bob wasn't ready either. Someone just decided to I'm not ready to get up in the morning. Someone's giving me a chance. So I think sponsorship is really important.
Yeah, listen, I think that mentorship, somebody who will give you guidance, versus sponsorship, somebody who sits in the room and advocates for you and says, I'll put my own name behind you, is so important. And you have to earn that.
Just one other thought on mentorship. I'm now giving real talk mentorship. No one told me all the secrets that I didn't know were happening, like what really happens, over the years, you think you're doing really, really well. One time years ago, I got feedback 10 years ago, and someone said, your bosses always love you, the people who work for you love you, but your peers don't really like you because you don't pay any attention to them. That was like real talk. Giving people real talk. The mentorship is real talk. Look, this may sound not like the nicest thing to say, but here's where you are not doing a great job in getting consensus around your candidacy.
Yeah. Those peers will become the people who determine your success. And it's such a great reminder. And that real talk is important. Any other thoughts on mentorship, sponsorship, what you've done, what you've learned, what you've experienced?
We call it mentorship in the moment, where, you get bits and bytes of information from so many different people who have been there, done that. Because, we all have different life lessons. We've all had different journeys. We've all had different experiences. And at every life stage, there's different advice that you might need. So we believe in, there's no one perfection doesn't exist anyways, one perfect mentor. Just grab bits and bytes of, experience and advice from people truly who have been there, done that. And when we talk about mentorship and sponsorship, and we spend a lot of time talking about the differences, we are launching this whole new concept called proximity ship. Because, even with sponsorship, there's built-in bias. You're going to pull up and recommend someone that you might know or someone that looks like you and acts like you. But what about bottom up? Spend 5 minutes with someone you don't know. You're going to learn something so new, someone that's different than you. And so really having employees be able to choose for 15 minutes who they want to know them. And so really reversing the whole concept of what we've done in the past so that we can create more, equality all around. So really thinking about these new ideas so that new talent can come up and rise the ranks. And also, how often does someone pick someone with strengths just like them? But what we're finding now is the soft powers, our differences, are our greatest strength, and they might not be recognized. So how do we make these invisible strengths of empathy and collaboration and passion and compassion and resilience, all of these strengths, which we now know are the greatest qualities of leadership today, become seen and not so invisible. So we're playing with a whole bunch of new things to reverse and flip the script and flip the balance.
Yeah, I love it. And, in the Q&A here, there's a question, a number of really good questions. Let me fire through some of them. What are your thoughts on having a male versus a female sponsor? Rachel, go ahead, Jenny.
Really, I was going to mention that, not all mentors are your same, sex, right? Same gender. And there are times when it actually is very valuable to have a mentor that is not of your same gender. They bring in a perspective that your little, circle of support doesn't provide. So I think that's really important. For me, I've been lucky. Like I said, Lifetime was just a very unusual place to work. One, because, we sort of made stuff up as we went along, right? When we started launching the network. And so that was a really great environment, and everybody just really helped each other out. It was like a startup mode, right? But as it got more sophisticated, you started to see more of the traditional, cliques and so forth. And so one thing I do want to mention about mentorship and sponsorship is, women of color don't necessarily have that go-to, of mentoring opportunity at the top, or less sponsorship opportunity at the top, right? And so I think that there's something that, we need to make sure stays top of mind, to reach out to that woman of color who, you see around and she's good, but, she's sort of, going upstream, trying to figure it out on her own. And, one of the things that, we women have done great since the civil rights movement is to help each other up, right? But that adding that other element, that, pigmentation on your skin, for lack of a, better, call out, does affect you. It really does affect you when you walk in a room. And so, I was lucky because, again, I didn't see that. But as my team grew, I started to see that in other people in my team, that kind of shyness and pullback where, they were nervous or whatever it may have been. So
I think it's such a great reminder, and I'm going to come back to the discussion of race because it's so relevant right now as we think about how do we really seize this moment to create a movement for racial equality. I want to come back to that. One question that's here in the Q&A. How do you choose a mentor? I like the mentor in the moment, Shelley. I think that's a good one. Callie or Rachel, any thoughts on how to choose a mentor?
I think we need to rebrand the idea of choosing a mentor, because I think so often mentorship is thought of as this lifelong commitment where we're on the phone once a week or doing something very regular. And to Shelley's point, there's that saying about, I think, friends are for reasons and seasons. You will go through many mentors in your life. And so what I would say is you can absolutely seek out someone and reach out to them and say, I would love to connect and have a coffee virtually with you. But I would also say, look for mentorship in so many other people, including in your peers. That's absolutely critical. What you can learn from the people below you, next to you, and above you is so critical to succeeding in the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. A question in here that I think is important: how do you onboard in a new media company? As somebody who's coming out of college and thinking about onboarding in a media company, what advice would you give them? Ignore my ringing phone. Okay.
My advice is to educate, educate, educate. I like to believe in three things: educate, communicate, and advocate. Educate. Be a forever student. This is something that I think about all the time. I devour the trades. I read everything in the news, or I try to. I don't actually. But I try to stay up to date and watch what different companies are doing, get a better understanding of who's experimenting on this platform, who's not, what branding campaigns are out there. That's educate. Communicate. Reach out to people. What's the worst that can happen? They don't respond. Okay, I'll take that, right? If you reach out to 50 people and one person responds, that's awesome. Congratulations. Feel great about that. And then 3, advocate. I think it's hard to realize that your boss is not a mind reader. And so getting that deeper understanding of how to talk about yourself and not be self-conscious, and instead realize that you're not bragging. Instead, you're just saying out loud what it is that you're doing. You're managing up. I think that that is something that is so key. And I would say that that's key for both onboarding as well as advancing.
What a great framework. 3 simple words to remember as you think about how you move through your career, how you communicate, just such good a basic framework. So thank you, Kelly, for sharing that. Rachel, I want to come and have a conversation that we were having before we got started here. And it's a conversation that is on everybody's mind right now, and that's the discussion on racial justice. I had a chance to talk with Mayor Lance Bottoms on Monday and Tuesday, and talk about an amazing, amazing woman. And she shared, as we were talking, a picture of her great-grandparents who were slaves. And she keeps that picture on her desk, and she also keeps next to it the homeowner's list of possessions that were part of his will, including her grandparents. And you look at that, and it's not that long ago that slavery was part of our past, and it's so easy to forget. I happen to be listening to a podcast right now, 1619, that talks about the history of slavery and the impact to society and our economics, and the fact that we haven't moved fast enough to leave that in the past. But what really inspired me as I talked to her was the conversation that we're all having right now, which is how do we take this moment in time, if that's been going on for as long as it has, to say we must fast forward. We must take this moment in time with the tragic death of George Floyd and so many others that have come before, and say seize it and make a commitment to do something different. You raised this as a topic as we were talking earlier. I'd welcome your thoughts as somebody who is not only a woman of color, but somebody who does career coaching on and has lived in the media world. Give us your thoughts as a starting point for the conversation, would you please?
Yeah, sure. So racism is obviously a very, very deep topic,
Yeah.
But it stems from beliefs. It stems from beliefs about a certain skin color, a certain race, and it stems from the ideology that one race is better than the other. So when we're having this conversation of race in the workplace, or whether we're having it with our friends, first of all, we need to think about what our beliefs are, and we need to be aware. We need to develop the self-awareness as to what those beliefs are. And sometimes we'll find that we may think that we believe one way, but then a situation occurs or something happens and it actually confronts that belief, and we're left with, oh, I didn't know that I thought that, or I didn't know that was my view. So it's a case of really addressing beliefs. I'm really happy to see that now, we're talking about things a bit more. We hear the terms microaggression. We're looking at the whole racial spectrum. What are some incidents of racism? And that's kind of coming out more and more. And I think we've kind of spoken about this as we've been talking. The point of education is just, it's an underpinning principle of life, right? Education. So the more that we spend time reading and studying and thinking about ourselves and really soaking up the information that's out there, the more alert we'll be and the more cognizant that we'll be of what this whole, what racism actually looks like. Because, I mean, it's been with us for a while, but do we really understand it? I think that's the question that we're trying to answer corporately. Do we really understand it? Do we really understand racism?
I think that's a framework that we can all use as you think about how to think about being intentional and purposeful. I think about unconscious biases, and I think it's my job today to be consciously aware of what those biases might be, to be able to listen and to learn so that I can act on behalf of things that I didn't know I was perhaps unconsciously biased about. I'd welcome other thoughts on this topic because I feel like we're just getting started, and yet it does feel like there's an opportunity to accelerate racial justice in a way that we haven't accelerated in the past.
So just two quick things. One, I'm actually very optimistic because we're having these conversations in the workplace. I think there have been a lot of conversations about race in people's personal lives, but not enough in the workplace. Second of all, what does being an anti-racist mean? That's different than just saying you're not a racist. And then I think what Rachel said is really true about education. I mean, I didn't even know about the incident that happened in Tulsa until a year ago, with Black Wall Street being basically burned down. I mean, I'm very clearly, I thought I was well educated, and I'm clearly not, because somewhere someone didn't tell me that story. That is just really messed up, that a massive incident in American history wasn't told to me. So education. I've been reading the book White Fragility. We have to educate ourselves. It is incredibly important. Otherwise, we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
we're back to educate, communicate, advocate. So, Callie, thank you. Sorry, Betty, you were jumping in.
Yeah, sorry about that. So for me, education is the key. I think that we've come to a point where there's an opportunity for huge course correction, right? And this is an area where I'm very concerned that if we leave it up to academia, it's going to take, decades for it to happen. And I think this is something where companies like big media companies, big tech companies, many represented here on this panel, are going to have to jump in and help, okay? Fast track these, the history books, right? Fast track the learning tools that are out there, because frankly, we are in this chaos as a society because we have been raised historically ignorant about the history of this country. Like you said, Alex, Black Wall Street. I first learned about that about 5 years ago when someone was pitching me an idea for screenplay. And I asked my partner and I said, what is she talking about? I've never heard of such a thing. And so we have, our story has been left in the hands of people who have agendas, let's just say it. And that agenda may be, maybe just a lazy agenda, right? They don't want to do the extra work to figure it out. Or that agenda may have, a more nefarious, sentiment behind it. The bottom line is we cannot move forward and not address this issue, because our kids, if they understand and they grow with this information, whatever's happening back home, whatever implicit bias they're being raised with, when they get to school and they learn the facts, they're going to be able to start thinking better, right? And we got to give them more credit than we do. Kids are amazing. And so that's the problem. We got to figure out a way to, come together as a world and solve this fast.
Yes. Educate and take responsibility for solving it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Callie.
I was just going to say,
go ahead, Callie.
We're seeing a huge shift as well because consumers are now belief-driven buyers. Yeah. They buy and vote with their wallets. And what that means is that corporate America now can no longer hide behind the legalese of these are difficult times and things like that. They have to be direct. They have to say exactly what they're planning to do, and they have to be accountable for it, whether that's through an exact timeline or through measurement. And that's something that I think is going to hugely change this conversation, is that businesses have now realized that purpose and profit can come together and be incredibly wonderful business strategies.
Yep. We talk about at Verizon 4 stakeholders: customers, employees, shareholders, and society. And you have to bring all 4 of those together. Shelley, I'm going to give you the last word on this, and then I'm going to ask you for a 30-second wrap on thoughts for the day that you want to share with this group. One of the open questions is, how do you deal with mommy guilt? So think about that for your wrap. Shelley, I'll go to you for the last word on the discussion on race.
Yeah, I always say equality is a choice, unconscious bias is an excuse. If you use the word unconscious, you're conscious. And so it's Tami, as you brought up, once conscious, once aware, once educated, what are you going to do about it? And so even things like equal pay day is different for white women than it is for black women. We have to start calling this out. 100-year anniversary of women's right to vote. White women different than black women. We need to be conscious of, the world that we're living in. Pay, equal pay, 80 cents on the dollar for women in general, 62 cents for black women. These are real challenges that we need to be completely aware of. And I think that when we think about even the workplace representation, of course, we need more. Reflection, everyone needs to see themselves. That's how we create this culture where we all feel like we belong, when we feel seen, when we feel heard, across the board. So I just wanted to point out the consciousness that we have to stop hiding behind implicit bias and unconscious bias. It's time to be conscious and then take action.
I love it. You never mince words, and you encourage causing trouble. It reminds me of John Lewis and his commitment to causing trouble for the right reasons. Okay, Jenny, I'm going to give you the first 30 seconds on a wrap, and then we'll go around the horn here.
Oh, my goodness. Really, 30 seconds, support each other. Honestly, we've got to. When people reach out to you, have the courtesy to return that reach out, right? Don't ignore it. Whether you can help or not, be honest. Say, you know what? I'm not the right person for you, but I have 3 more I can connect you with. Give me a couple of days to do that. We have to be better at supporting each other because the boys have figured it out for centuries, right? They come together, they put aside their differences. We need to do that.
I love it. Support, lift each other up. Callie.
I would say, adding on to Jenny, the greatest thing we can do in addition to educate, communicate, and advocate is learn to do that for each other. So it's not just about seeing your peers as competitors for the job that you're going for. It's so crucial to see them as key allies and people on your team who, if they succeed, you succeed. That is absolutely critical. There's a theory called shine theory that is about this idea that when you shine, I shine. That's something that we should all be embracing. And I think that at a moment like this, to Jenny's point, reach out to people. Think about the opportunities that you could give to people in return. Mentors and mentees, we're not having those water cooler conversations anymore. How can you recreate that? How can you actively reach out to the people you mentor? How can you actively reach out to people who you are wanting to be mentored by? Think about that.
Reach out now more than ever. People are lonely. They need that connection, that human connection, advocating for each other. Shelley.
I have a no regret policy to eliminate the guilt. I never want to look back and say shoulda, woulda, coulda. So I think forward. If I feel bad about something, I don't do it. And if not, I move forward. And I can promise you with 100% certainty, work will not ever remember the hour meeting you missed or the trip you didn't take. But the people that are important in your life will always remember those moments that you were there. So I think we all need a no regret policy.
I love it. No regrets. You never get it back. Alex.
I always say discomfort leads to growth, and I have never felt so much discomfort as I have in the last 5 months, and I think we all feel the same way. And so I think remarkable change is going to come out of this, and I just want us to all try and stay optimistic because it is really difficult right now, but I truly believe that we will come out of this in a better place.
Yeah, I think it's terrific. Okay, Rachel, I'll give you the last word.
I would say be present. Be present in everything you do. When you eat your breakfast, take the time to enjoy it. Make sure that you make time for your 8 hours of rest, because we know that 7 to 9 is recommended. And relish in the simple things like sunlight, when you drink a glass of water, enjoy it, enjoy every drip of it. And just focus on the simple things.
I love it. Be present, enjoy every drip of that water. I'm going to leave you with one last thought that I think is so important for women, and that is take time to take care of yourself. In a busy time, we tend to leave ourselves to the very last. Don't allow yourself to be the leftover. Put yourself front and center. Enjoy that moment. Be present and have a no regrets policy. Ladies, thank you for joining us for our first chat this afternoon. Be well.